Matt Huffman and Finance Committee Chairman Brian Stewart. Welcome back to Message from the House.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
This is our first repeat guest set.
Oh, that's right. It's been always a long time
Dynamic
ago.
duo. We're back
that's
again.
right.
It is the dynamic duo. We were talking about, obviously, the budget in its initial phases the last time, and now it's officially been passed and ready to catch back up. This speaker was your first budget back in the House as Speaker.
Right.
And then Rep. Stewart, this is your first budget as Finance Chairman.
Right.
I want to open up by just asking, how did you both feel that the process went?
Well, this is, I guess, would be my 9th budget overall, 4 in the House and 4 in the Senate. Just process-wise, unless I'm mistaken, this is the first time that we voted a conference committee report out and walked out the door about 6 o'clock in the evening, even though some folks, we had a long session, 3 hours, mostly talking, 4 hours. But usually we're there at 2 o'clock in the morning as we're trotting around trying to find more things. So, and we passed it on June 25th. We didn't wait till June 30th. There's no continuing resolution. And we had an extraordinary amount of process in the House, and I think they did the Senate over the last 5 months. So, the fact that we could do all that, I think it's a tribute certainly to Brian and his role, but Mike DeVilla and all the staff. So I whether you like it or not, and I really like it, a lot of great stuff. The fact that it was done with professionalism and some real alacrity, as they say, was really, really impressive.
Absolutely. Rep. Stewart?
I think I was really pleased how member-driven it was. I think the speaker set up a process early on where you had, almost every member of the House sat on a committee that considered parts of the budget. So we were very familiar with what our members wanted. Living this for 6 months, when we did get to conference committee, I could remember having had those 50-plus member meetings and, had a really thorough session on our side to where we knew what our members wanted. We knew what was important. We knew what we could kind of afford to trade and compromise on, and where we needed to stand extra firm. And so I'm encouraged by we get the budget vote done and just members coming up saying, thanks for making sure that, this priority of mine was taken care of, or this priority. And so I think members are, sometimes you just vote for the budget because you got to vote for the budget. I think this time members feel like we really accomplished something noteworthy.
You really did a nice job, I will say, reading through all of the items conference committee night, midnight to 2 a.m. My voice probably would have gone out.
Reading 590 numbers at 2 a.m. just like Thomas Jefferson dreamed of.
You barely messed up, too. I was like, wow, he's sharp, reading, DD, CO, you'll probably hear that in your sleep for a couple months after this. All right, so I want to transition now into school funding. The House invested almost $700 million more in education funding for this budget. Why was this such an important provision for us to include?
Well, clearly, Ohio's got a lot of public schools in our state. It's important to members in both parties, and certainly ours as well. We started out in the House and passed a budget that increased funding for public education. The Senate did as well. And so, how we educate our students, we're a school choice state. We should be. We're going to continue to be. And I think that when you see in this budget is we were able to prioritize and do expansions to all. In addition to doing increased funding for public schools, we have an expansion of school choice again. And so I think you're going to see those things, be in tandem. We have members that, are passionate about both. And I think it's a good part of this budget that we're able to take care of schools wherever Ohioans want to send their kids.
Yeah. So, Brian, I think, explained some of the detail, but I think if you look at this holistically over the last 25 years, the increase in funding for education, both public and private, and our community schools, known as charter schools, has been extraordinary in the state of Ohio. The first 20 years, we increased by 50% over inflation, and then the last 3 budgets really are unprecedented increases in school funding. The governor's budget increased collectively $200 million. The House budget was $500 ultimately. In the Senate it was a little bit more, but ultimately $700 million increase over the $12 or $13 billion that we already spend. So it's really it's really extraordinary. And the disappointing part of this is that, I had a reporter yesterday ask me, what do you say to those people who say you've cut funding to public schools? And my answer to that is, I say to them, you are misinformed, and you should go to the people who are saying those things and say, tell me the truth. And whether it's in the media or local school district folks or whoever it is. Now, the thing about this is, with over 600 school districts, they're not all treated the same, and they shouldn't be, because they have, different abilities to pay and all of that. But the extraordinary amount of increase reflects the importance to public schools in all K-12 education.
Absolutely. Bouncing off of that, property taxes, arguably one of the most important issues to Ohioans right now. Substantial relief going into this budget. Talk me through what those provisions are.
Well, I think one of the things we're really excited about is we are, for the first time, giving local governments the ability to join the state and offer expanded homestead exemptions and expanded owner occupancy credit. People sometimes don't realize state government gets $0 from property taxes. Those all stay local. And so when we're going to provide relief, that's where the relief is going to come from. So I think empowering the local governments to kind of join us in that effort. The state's again going to spend $2 billion on property tax relief, just as we have been for the previous many years. But now we've also expanded transparency at the local level and county budget commissions, given those budget commissions the ability to cap increases, to make sure that we're not extracting money from our residents unless those government entities actually need it. And so, we have reforms on the 20 mil floor. We have, a lot of this is kind of in the weeds, and sometimes it's hard for people to understand every aspect of it. But this is the most significant property tax relief effort we've had in decades. And I think that cumulatively, all these different kind of levers that we're giving, the locals to pull and state government and our taxing authorities to use, it is going to result in significant relief.
Yeah, and one of the initiatives of the House was to look at the carryovers that many school districts have. Now, I would say maybe 75% of the school districts are operating with, a carryover limit that's typical, 25%, 30%. So the House set that 30%, that if you have enough money, return that to the taxpayers by lowering their taxes in the immediate year. The Senate wanted that to be 50%. Our budget, our cut was $4.2 billion. The Senate was, I think, 1.7. And in typical legislative compromise fashion, we decided, well, how about 40%? And but we also put provisions in there that said if in many counties we can save 40%, but these are very small in terms of dollars carryover. So what we're really trying to do with this is to say there are some school districts, a substantial number of them, that spend a lot of money, that are carrying over a lot of money, and all we're simply saying is, if you're not going to use the money for your operations, then return it to the taxpayers. And I think in many of the school districts, you'll see immediate tax relief in your January 26th. Not all of them, because some of them don't have it. And I want to address the fiscal restraint question. Well, we're really good. That's why we have a carryover. Well, maybe, but there are a lot of school districts that are way beyond the average that they spend. I'll mention Orange School District in particular. They are second in terms of most amount of in what they pay their teachers. Some people may say that's great, but they spend $20,000 or more per administrator. And the reason that they do that is because they've got the money. There's extraordinary real estate tax that's paid out by some of the places in there. So you look at places like Orange School District, Columbus School District, many of the others that have a lot of money. And all we're saying again is, if you're not going to spend it, return it to the taxpayers.
We had one large school district come in as just one of many examples, but they had a 68% carryover. It's $161 million sitting in the bank. And they were kind of bragging about the fact that they're making $8 million a year in interest on the residents' money. And when I asked them in committee, well, don't you think maybe your residents would prefer to keep that $8 million, to make that $8 million for themselves? It was like, well, no, this is money that's just, entitled to government. We don't agree with that.
And, expanding on that, there were a lot of concerns of, we had plans to renovate this building or that building. Talk me through that, they can move that money into different accounts. This isn't limiting them on necessary improvements.
Yeah, it is interesting that a huge number of public improvement or physical improvement projects suddenly arose
Yeah.
when this was suggested back in April. But the answer is that if in fact you're getting ready to build a new school or whatever the physical improvement is, then you can use that money. It's not part of your operating carryover. But what we also said is, okay, if you do that and you haven't spent the money within 3 years, then it goes directly to tax relief. And we want local school boards to control what's going on in their district. Local folks are going to come into school board meetings and say, we're suddenly building a new school building? Yeah. I didn't know that. I sure would like to have that money so I can do some remodeling at my own house. So those local conversations have to take place. Instead of blaming the guy who's not in the room, it must be the state legislature. It's your money. Go talk to your local school board about it.
I'm going to use the phrase from the last podcast. Thanks for breaking that down. I think that was a great way to explain it. So thank you.
You bet.
You guys so much.
I do my best.
I want to roll into the flat income tax.
Yeah.
That is a part of this budget. This is going to really promote a lot of economic opportunity and growth. Speaker, talk through.
I mean, one of the things people presuppose that if you lower the tax rate, that the state's going to have less money. So I would invite everybody to research this and look at it. We've gone from 9 tax brackets down to 1 in the state of Ohio. But even before this, we went from 9 to 2. We went from a top rate of about 9% down to 3.5%. Every year, the state of Ohio has received more income tax revenue. And it's the money, it's the revenue, it's the cash that pays for the programs. The rate doesn't determine that. And the reason that happens is if instead of 9% you're paying 3%, you're saving 6%, you make $200,000. Well, that's $12,000. Well, what happens with the $12,000? Some people save it or give it away, but most people spend it. And wherever they're spending it, whoever's providing that service or good, they have income. And that's good for that other person who gets the income, but they're also paying more income tax. And so as the economy works its way through, more people are getting a piece of the action, more people are paying income tax, thus more income tax revenue. That's why flat, low tax rates, income tax rates are good. By the way, you get more sales tax, commercial activity tax, you get more excise taxes on alcohol and gas and cigarettes, all of those things. That's what the free market economy is about. The more it's operating, the more economic activity, the more revenue for the government. Now, for those who are primarily concerned about revenue for the government, you're going to have more with a lower flat tax rate. The magic question always is, well, what is low that we're still going to get revenue? We will have the second lowest flat tax rate in the country. And the lowest of all of the states that we generally compete with, which are the Great Lakes states in the Midwest in terms of getting businesses and people to move here.
That is amazing. Speaking of competing with our neighboring states, we made everybody wait to the end of the podcast to discuss the Browns stadium deal. This was so fascinating to talk through with you all and just to hear the other numbers from a Nashville or an Indianapolis and, the economic activity that goes into their stadiums and everything it brings in. Representative Stewart, we ultimately made the decision to go with the unclaimed funds route. There is now an opportunity for other teams to take advantage of some of those funds with certain provisions. Talk me through this stadium deal.
Well, I think it's going to be one of the premier entertainment sites in all of America. And I think when we talk about Ohio and we talk about, our population dwindling compared to other states, if we want that to reverse course, and I know we all do, then we need to be serious about what our competing states are doing, which is, in addition to giving tax relief, in addition to having good schools, having those amenities and quality of life things that people come to expect in major cities is important. So I like the solution we ended up with. I think you're avoiding interest costs. I think there's so much money that's built up in unclaimed funds that, we have a process online to make it easier for people to claim these funds, and they're still not being claimed because some folks have determined it's not worth it, or it's so old that we really can't even find the people who it's entitled to. So I think it's a clever way, a smart, common sense way to fund something, these major one-time projects. I am happy that at the end of this budget, we have an additional $400 million that's going into a cultural facilities fund, because I think that it lets us have that conversation with a lot of amazing facilities and organizations around the state who, if they can meet the similar criteria, if they can make sure that the state's going to be made whole, they can show the tax advantage to the taxpayers, having an escrow, having protections for the taxpayers, but also getting some of these large-scale major projects done. I think that's a good place to be.
Yeah, I think that if we step back and said, hey, somebody's going to come in and spend $2 billion on a new economic development project, most of the time we're falling all over ourselves when an Intel or Anduril or Joby or many of these other mega projects, and they get tax credits and abatements and deferrals, all sorts of things. I think for the project there in Pickaway County, it was about $1 billion investment. There's about $500 million in state incentives, almost 50%. But in this case, they had to prove that we were going to get all our money back, and we made them put up $100 million first. Now, if that was our attitude with economic development, typically people would say, I'm going to be in Indianapolis or Detroit or someplace else talking to them about it. And I particularly think it's unfortunate, the personal attacks on the people who were trying to get this done. One of our Democratic members on the House yesterday really made, I thought, some pretty offensive remarks about the owners of the Cleveland Browns. I mean, these are folks who are spending billions of their own dollars to get this thing done. It must be a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers fans out there. I don't know. So
Listen, when Justin Fields went to the Steelers, I still couldn't buy a jersey. I have a Chicago Bears jersey. I am a big Justin Fields person. We'll probably get a Jets one, but yeah, I couldn't get a terrible towel. Absolutely not. The $100 million, break that down for folks to understand that this is a big safety cushion.
Sure. So the one of the things the organization is called the Brook Park Economic Development Project. If people see that, that's where the money is going. And before they can get the money, the Ohio Tax Department and the Office of Budget and Management need to show them that, in fact, the revenue generated from this project will exceed the $600 million that goes to them. Also, the Facilities Commission will have to say that you actually have the money, that you can build this, that this isn't money we're going in and all that. So those three entities need to be convinced that those are state entities. So again, you would think that would be enough, but we also looked at the organization and said, you have to give us $50 million that we're going to keep. And in addition, you have to put out a $50 million line of credit. Again, we don't require that of any of these other large projects or frankly, any of your local economic development projects. We don't the city doesn't have to look at the new guy who's building a plant come in and say, well, pony up some money first because you may go south on me. And we'll have a check every 4 years and say, okay, in fact, did these taxes do what you said they would do? And if they didn't, you can go get the $50 million and pay it to the state. You can go get the next $50 million and pay. So it's and all the financial projections before this have shown that independent groups, again, the state of Ohio will have to verify that that's true before they get any money.
A lot of parameters there. Thank you both for discussing that. Overall, the budget also prioritized a lot of other conservative measures and values. Rep. Stewart, you mentioned, this was really a member-focused budget. Any other provisions that you both would like to talk about that went into this thing?
Well, I mean, in particular, I think Ohio continues to lead as an educational choice state. One of the things I'm particularly proud of is that we now have an educational savings account for non-chartered schools, as well as additional tax credit help for homeschoolers. Now, some folks said, well, there's no accountability. Well, the best accountability is a parent in their house teaching their child. But on what we call non-chartered or O8 schools, these are schools that will have to, for the first time, if they want to accept these, take some kind of standardized test. And by the way, some of them won't because they want nothing to do with the state. If for no other reason, people should be interested in making sure these schools thrive. We pay on average to educate a child in public schools, and granted, we require public schools to do a lot more, but we pay $16,300 on average. Now, in my part of the state, it's much less than that. The Bluffton School District, it's $12,000. But in places like Columbus, Ohio, it far exceeds that. Well, the cost of an Ed Choice scholarship is about $8,000. So if a parent says, I'm going to go take less money from the state and go to less expensive, that's a good thing for the taxpayer. Well, these schools, it's even less. It's $4,000 for a child to go to that school. And of course, homeschoolers save the state the most amount of money of all. And so as we go through this, the question, we talked about how great it is to have $700 million or more in public school. That doesn't mean the problem's solved, because it just means public schools are a lot better off with this budget, right? So the question ultimately becomes, what's the best opportunity for a parent and a household for their child? And then how does the taxpayer pay for that? Because the taxpayer would like to make sure we got a good education, but they don't want to overpay. Yep. They don't want to underpay, but these are better alternatives fiscally for the taxpayer.
I heard these conversations all the time growing up, not understanding the extent of it, of course, because I went to a private school. So a big sacrifice that a lot of our, families make to either homeschool or go to private schools. Representative Stewart, any other provisions that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I think that it's important to note that there are parts of governmental services that we are funding in addition to doing tax relief. We made a decision that we could do both at the same time. We have the governor's merit scholarship to keep more Ohio high school graduates here in the state. It's a $5,000 scholarship if you graduate in the top 5% of your class anywhere in the state. We think that's a great program. We have expanded child wellness centers where we know we have a children's services crisis where some of these counties don't have space, unfortunately, for kids that are coming into their care because they've been abused elsewhere. We funded that. Increased funding for children's services, increased funding for, the personal needs allowance for Medicaid, all of these things that, we get criticized for not funding enough. We increase funding for most of them. And I think that we've shown in this budget that we can respect the taxpayer, we can value economic liberty, we can reduce the tax burden and still take care of the basic governmental functions and those that are truly in need. We can do both at the same time.
Anything else? Can you believe that we were on time this budget podcast?
Well, I
thought we'd go over.
It is extraordinary,
Yeah.
and of course, we did have sessions scheduled for tomorrow, and I looked at everyone and I said, if we don't pass it on Wednesday, we'll be here Thursday or Friday or Saturday, Sunday. Monday is June 30th. I don't know that there's always a few folks who are kind of outliers, and we were at about 52 votes out of our 65 in our caucus. We had one member who wasn't able to attend, but those other 10, maybe they knew but actually didn't really commit. A couple of them as they were sitting there listening to floor speeches. But I think, Brian was an absolute bulldog in working on this thing. And I think that helped a lot. We really, I think, have very talented people on both sides in both the House and the Senate. Many people know that David Reedy was the assistant budget director in the Senate. And he came with me. Of course, Marcus Benjamin and Regan Burkunda were all involved in policy, and they came over. So I think that there's really talented professional staff on both sides. And that greatly aids the legislators in getting through the issues. So I'm still surprised because it just usually doesn't go this smoothly.
Yeah.
And let me say this, too. There are issues that have been pending in the state for years, many of them that have finally been decided with this budget. So that's really the extraordinary thing, I think.
Well, gentlemen, I want to say a big congratulations. It's been amazing. Rep Stewart, your aides, you guys have worked so hard during this thing. So congratulations to you. Obviously, Speaker, you as well.
I'm going to go take a nap.
Yeah. Like you said, you're going to take your kids on a vacation, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
You deserve it.
Doing a movie theater later today, I think.
Oh, that's perfect. Which movie? I can't wait.
28 years later, I've been holed up in conference committee for like 9 days, like
know.
avoiding spoilers and trying not to get spoiled on my phone. So
I know. I can't wait to see Jurassic World coming up this summer. I'm talking about movies. It doesn't matter how many they make. I will watch them. All right, social media. You can follow us on the Ohio House GOP Caucus on Facebook, Ohio House_GOP on Instagram, OHR GOP Caucus on Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you guys.
Thank you, and happy birthday.
Thank you, Speaker.